Welcome to Around the World with Dane Waters. I'm your host, Dane Waters. It's always a pleasure to be here. Today we have a lot to talk about. Well, I say that every week. One of these days I'm going to come up with some original stuff to say. But the thing is, the world is such an amazing place. There's always so much to talk about. So let's talk about some of the headlines around the world and highlights around the world. The two H is always hard for me to say. First and foremost, no, Mother Nature. In my 2025 prediction, I made the apocalyptic, and I shouldn't probably have said it, prediction that in California and Los Angeles, they're going to have a great earthquake this year. I feel really bad for that because of what they're going through with this massive fire. I mean, I've had three friends who have lost their homes in the fire. It's just stunning what's happening. It's the Great Fire. We had the Great Fire of London in 1666. Well, let me tell you, this is probably going to go down as the Great Fire that'll even it's going to be the greatest natural disaster in U.S. history, and so it's just really sad. And so my heart goes out to all those people in California dealing with that. But Mother Nature, once again, you can't mess with Mother Nature. I mean, she when she's in a bad mood, she's in a bad mood. So hopefully there won't be any additional problems after the fires, and maybe there'll never be another earthquake in California. But on the political front, Beirut, Lebanon. I lived there for several years. It was one of those things where Hezbollah controlled the entire country. There was a duality of governments there, basically. But given what happened with Israel and Hezbollah was diminished. What happened in Syria with Assad being taken out of power meant that Iran can't send weapons across the border into Israel. So it was able to basically take Hezbollah and really limit their ability and their power. And this has been exemplified by finally, after 2 years, a new president was chosen in Lebanon. And also yesterday, they chose a new prime minister. Now, the interesting thing about this prime minister, it was not a prime minister that was supported by the United States. And actually, it's a prime minister who was with the International Court of Justice out of The Hague, and that he had been very anti what was going on in Gaza, not necessarily a friend of Israel, so it's going to see what happens. But the good part is that in Lebanon, things are moving forward. I think there's a great opportunity there for the country to once and for all to rid itself of Hezbollah and Hezbollah's control. Venezuela, there's a lot of bluster about the guy who won the presidency to going down there to take it back. But Maduro, I tell you, he runs with an iron fist down there. And, we're going to do a show on Venezuela here shortly to talk about is there even a chance of any democracy ever returning to Venezuela? Anyway, so those are the big top lines. Now, today we're going to be talking about, right after the break, when our guest shows up, we're going to be talking about power and around the world. I know power doesn't sound very sexy this morning, but I will make it very sexy. So anyway, let's take a break and we'll be back around the world with Dane Waters. Thanks for being here.
What we've always maintained is the never Trump move. I'll bring it down to the area. Lagos has become one of the largest exporters of Peruvian ivory in the world.
Of the free world nation, where your votes will get stolen if you can vote there at all.
Welcome back to Around the World with Dane Waters. I'm your host, Dane Waters, and I see a blank screen there, and I think there he is. There is Keith Coleman, the man of the hour. How are you, sir?
Good, my friend. How are you?
Doing great. Well, listen, thank you for being here. As far as an introduction, I'm going to do a best an introduction as I could. I'm a Bama boy, so I'm not capable of saying anything really profound. But, Keith and I have known each other for, oh my God, 20 years, maybe, something like that.
It's been a long time, my friend.
Yeah, well, you look what happened to me. I lost my hair. You grew hair, so it's that's a sign of maturity there for you. But we've known each other. Keith is the president and founder and CEO. I'm not sure all the titles of Mid American Engine. I know, listen, I was telling the guest before you showed up that how am I going to make power sound so sexy? Well, listen, when you talk about it, it's going to sound sexy, Keith. So I know it is. But, we were talking about Mother Nature just before we started
Energy,
here.
Dane, is energy.
Energy. I'm sorry. See, already you're making it sound sexy.
There you go.
But listen, one thing that we all have to understand, I lived in Beirut for 3 years in Lebanon, and let me tell you, we missed having energy. Every single day we were lucky if we had 3 to 4 hours of energy a day. It's something we take for granted, no matter what part of the world you're in. So let's get started talking about it. The reason I wanted to have you on today is because around the world, as I was just saying, without energy, you can't live, you can't survive. And you are currently working in Ukraine on trying to restore the energy sector there. So tell us about what's going on in Ukraine, in your opinion.
Well, it's this is an interesting war, if you will, in Ukraine from the standpoint that never before has inexpensive, low-tech weaponry been used so effectively to degrade, infrastructure, and to the whole face of warfare has changed in the sense that both sides, I would say, I would give the Ukrainians the edge here because they really, from the beginning, started using drone technology and have expanded on that to its maximum capability. But from Russia's side, they immediately went after the utility grid, as is it's an interesting point because Russia immediately went after the utility grid, and that was a knock on the fight in World War II, is why the Allied forces never really attacked the utility grid in Germany, and they did not. In this case, Russia went after the utility grid, knocking out major substations, knocking out any either thermal power plants, pretty much damaging anything they could find as a target of opportunity, except for, and I will say this to give them credit at that, since they have a lot of experience with Chernobyl, they did not damage the nuclear reactor down south and of Ukraine to the point of creating an ecological disaster for the world. But by doing so, I would say, you can listen to various reports, and anywhere from 60 to 75% of the grid has been affected. I would say probably effectively at least 50% of it has been degraded to the point it's unusable. And the other problem that comes with the destruction that's happened, the grid that was there previous to the war was all Soviet or post-Soviet construction. So where are the spare parts for the grid? They're made in Russia, and that's where the supply of most of that is. Although probably a lot of that was actually made in Ukraine, but the grid is going to have to be completely reconstructed. There, it's an analog system. It's antiquated. There are no spare parts. It's of a different era. So now it's just to get back to rebuilding the grid and bringing back some semblance of normal life to people, because they're without power and they're without heat.
Well, let's talk about that, because when I lived in Ukraine, the winters there can be brutal. They can, and it's one of those things where it's I consider it psychological warfare, is that you take the heat away and people are bundled up in their homes, freezing, and all they want is this war to end. And I tell you, I have several friends in Ukraine who are ready for the war to end because they're tired of not having energy and heat and things of that nature. So let me understand this. When we talk about the power grid, just so I put it in perspective. We're talking about what happens. These drones come in from Russia and they just take out the towers. What do they actually do and take out when they attack?
You're looking for, when you would drive around any place you lived, be it Lebanon, be it wherever, any place where they're distributing power from the overhead, which is high voltage, from the power plant down to the local level. You have substation transformers, and those are easily identified. They're easily identified either A, on the ground, or B, by satellite. And I'm sure that the folks who are pursuing the war from a tactical standpoint in Russia by satellite identified, the key points of distribution. So the first thing you do is you go after distribution transformers. Then you go after the power plants themselves. And whether it's, taking down power lines themselves is tedious, but taking out, you take out a power plant, and if you think about it, 100 megawatts of power generally serves about 1 million people. And so you take down a power plant that's, at 100 megawatt blocks or whatever it is, you're taking out, services to 1 million people. And to what you said, as you well know, I have lots of friends in Ukraine too, from business in the past, and I have lots of friends also in Russia. So I don't think anybody really likes war. I know I certainly don't, but by making people cold and making them wet, and making them putting them in a place of no power, you certainly reduce the will to pursue.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm going to do a show in the future about the psychological impact of war. And I tell you, one of the greatest growth industries, sadly, in Ukraine is psychiatrists and psychologists trying to deal with the impact of it every single day. So the power in Ukraine. I've been to Chernobyl. Luckily I'm not right. That's why I lost all my hair. When I went up to Chernobyl.
I stayed away.
Yeah, clearly you did. So where I understand you're right. They're not attacking the nuclear facilities, which generates power. But what other kind of facilities do they use? I remember I was down in Guyana in South America, and their entire country was run off a diesel generator, basically, when you get down to a diesel plant. So where does the power come from in Ukraine initially?
Well, let me just go back to one thing. They don't have to attack the nuclear power plant itself to damage reactors. All they do is radiate out from that within the first 5 miles and start taking out substations, and you reduce the ability to send that power anywhere. So you idle the nuclear power plant. And other forms of power generation, because Ukraine has been on the natural gas highway to Europe, from the inception of pipelines, and they've taken advantage of gas that was originally provided when they were part of the Soviet Union, and then the gas arrangements to sell them natural gas post-Soviet Union. And natural gas is used in gas turbines. In Nikolaya, for instance, one of the largest gas turbine manufacturers in the world is a company called Zoya. And I actually have been in that factory. We've discussed with them before about building generator sets for us prior to the war. And so they're burning natural gas for power generation. You can use natural gas in boilers to make steam, to turn steam turbines to make electricity. So, for the most part, they built their economy on the back of natural gas power generation, some oil. When I'm talking about burning oil, that's the most expensive form of energy from the standpoint of a fuel. It's not the most expensive form of energy. There's others that compete with that some people call green. But they've been using natural gas, and of course that's been curtailed and to a large extent, and but they found supplemental ways to get natural gas. But that, so going back and trying to bring power in, that creates its own set of limitations. And but they have some oil burning power plants. They're bringing more in now, small generator sets. But in the past, for their main source of power generation was nuclear power, gas turbine generator sets, and steam turbine fired from boilers and making steam to turn steam turbines.
Well, so let's talk about this. So when they come in, excuse me, when they attack, how quickly? Talk to us about what you do. So I mean, are you the Red Adair of energy grids? I mean, are you the guy who's going to go in there and fix things when they break or are destroyed?
Well, as they said in the right stuff, no bucks, no Buck Rogers. I mean, that's the unfortunate part of this all is, I mean, it takes money to do these things. And the U.S. has made a tremendous effort vis-a-vis USAID. They have another arm there called Tetra Tech who's doing a fantastic job managing this situation. They've been on the scene since the beginning. So they're funding a lot of efforts to bring back power. Unfortunately, there's an overhead war. This is not such a small percentage of this war is being pursued at the borders or at the areas where people are actually shooting guns. I mean, it's devastating. And nonetheless, I'm not making light of that, but it's an unusual war where it's overhead. But for me, as we are engaged by the public sector, the private sector, or the U.S. government sector or other entities, um, you know, we match solutions to problems, and that's really what one of the things that we're good at. And we're here in Dubai today, setting up new sources of supply because the world's dynamic, and you have Houthis shooting at ships in the Red Sea, so you have to find new places to work from. But as far as going into Ukraine, we're familiar with being in places where people are shooting at you, and in this particular case, it's interesting because energy and power production has been absolutely zeroed in by Russia as a target point. So when you're working in an area and you are repairing the grid or you're installing new power generation, you're a target of opportunity, and that presents some real special circumstance nowadays, because as a target of opportunity, you don't have to worry about somebody shooting an AK-47 at you, but you have to worry about a drone that's been built in Iran, sold to Russia, and that's targeting you. And Ukraine's been very effective in taking those drones out, but you can't, if they shoot 100 at you, it's one of the 30 that kills you. So you have to be very vigilant in that. And so it's dangerous work, but, all of that's taken very serious. And it's always a matter of mitigated risk and acceptable risk.
Yeah, I know. When I was in Ukraine probably about, I don't know, 2 months ago, and with the sirens going off constantly, you just never know. And these drones, you're right. I mean, these drones, I saw one had been shot down. I mean, they're not that sophisticated. I mean, they really aren't.
Not at all.
And it's just like something you'd see, flying in your backyard. But I mean, they're deadly. They definitely are. So how quickly does it take? When you said that, tell me again, what percentage of the power grid is not working in Ukraine currently?
Well, I would, there's numbers all over the place. When we go into meetings, we don't specifically ask those questions. It's kind of irrelevant. But I mean, the numbers that that are commonly out there are somewhere between 50 to 60% of the grid has been destroyed, and there's a term in my industry called distributed power generation, DG, distributed generation, and that's the concept of bringing in power and putting it at the point of consumption. And that's right now we're kind of using the disaster recovery mode like we would in Katrina or Rita or any hurricane situation to go to the place where it needs. But I'd say, truly the grid is, I would say, 60% of it is destroyed from the standpoint of either power generation and or distribution.
Well, that's substantial, no doubt about it. Well, listen, we're going to have to take a quick break here. So as soon as we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about your history, talking about Katrina and things of this nature. So anyway, thanks for being with Dane Waters, Around the World with Dane Waters. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Keith Coleman.
I'll break it down into a couple of Syria, Lagos has become one of the largest exporters of Pacific ivory in the world.
Those are the free world nation. Where your votes will get stolen if you can vote there at all.
TV personality.
Oh, speaking of which, looking good for TV personalities. I'm back. I'm sorry during the break there, Keith and I had to catch up because, listen, even though we've known each other forever, we never get to see each other because we're always in different parts of the world. So let's go back to, like when I first met you, you weren't involved in, well, maybe you were involved in Ukraine, just didn't know it at the time. But how did you get into energy? I mean, excuse me, how did you get into this? And tell me a little bit about your background.
It's an interesting thing because, when I was growing up, my grandfather was an entrepreneur and ran away from home when he was 16, too young for World War One, old enough to go to Haiti and Dominican Republic for the Civil War, lied about his age, joined the Marines. His mother found him there and had the Commandant of the Marine Corps send him home when he was just shy of 18. But while he was there, he learned, he was a signal corpsman. He learned shortwave and ham radio and repairing radios, and later in life put himself through what is now Duke, and then went on to work for Bell Labs, working on radar and developing radar, and actually started deploying radar, air-to-air radar, which is the cutting edge in World War II, and installing it and training pilots to use it. So I grew up on his knee, to be honest with you. My dad traveled. My grandfather gave me wanderlust, which I think the man sitting across the screen from me probably has a good dose of that. And I grew up playing with drawings that were stamped, security cleared, and looking at those and talking to him. And so always had an interest, and my rector sets a kid as energy. And, sometimes in life, we don't really plan where we're going. Fortunately, God is good enough to direct us in the right direction. And I started off, working in his shop, in a small engine shop, and just gained an affection for engines, electricity, and it just kind of morphed into that. My first foray into this was at the conclusion of the Vietnam War. All this power generation assets had come back to the States. And as I started my business, I would go to Fort Killeen, Texas, and buy generator sets from the U.S. military and bring them back to Memphis, Tennessee, and refurbish them and resell them. And that's kind of where it started. As a grassroots effort, and so it grew from there.
Well, that's impressive. Definitely very impressive. You've always been an impressive man. So let's talk about, like, in America, you were involved in, recently we have the wildfires happening in Los Angeles, right? And I just want to talk about this briefly. Do you think that, how does a fire like that, I mean, totally topic, it's not about war, but how does a fire like that impact the power grid in Los Angeles? Are they going to be having issues with the power grid out there?
I'm sure there's issues from the standpoint that the fire is burning and it's taking out, transmission lines as it goes. And absolutely it affects it. And the other thing is that, when they're not, we won't go deep into that, but when they're not raking the forest and do the things, and when you have a lightning strike on a power line, it goes down, starts a fire. But I mean, this fire is so massive, and there are certainly transmission lines that were crossing the mountains or transversing the mountains, and even into the areas that are burned, that replacing that line is costly, time consuming, but it has to disrupt the energy flow in the state.
Well, we were talking about, before you got on the show, about Mother Nature and the power of Mother Nature, and what's happening in California. And actually, we talk about earthquakes, and you have done a lot of work with hurricanes, in the Gulf. So if you look at a world where on one hand, we have Mother Nature really causing havoc with power, or energy, as you say. And then now you have wars that are causing problems with energy. I mean, you definitely are in the growth industry, no doubt about it. Do you see, just once again, I'm going to go off on some random tangent here. Do you see, in your business, you don't do green energy, do you? Do you think that is a...
We do. I mean, we're, one of our clients right now that I can't really discuss this, but we're working with them, and for power generation to be involved in backing up their battery system, which is backing up a major utility. And so we are also we've worked on photovoltaic as we all the panels you see on top of roads nowadays and generating power with the sun. There's some forms of that, which like wind turbines, which in my opinion is the most expensive electricity to be made, and I'm not a fan of that. I mean, everybody seems to have in their mind that green is cheap and it's the most expensive forms of energy, but we are dabbling in it. And we're working with it, and dabbling is probably not the right word, but there are some promising areas there. Just like you drive your hybrid car, you have an engine, you have a battery. Hybrid power systems seem to be very effective and reducing carbon footprints and providing stability. But, even Bill Gates came to the realization, I had to say that, expecting that in the world we live in, the digital world we live in, especially in the world of energy right now, artificial intelligence is eating up data centers left and right. They're building data centers. If you were to order, new generator sets from the major manufacturers, you're talking about 3.5 megawatts. You're talking about a 2.5, 3 year wait. Just in North Alabama, Meta has 3 data centers. Facebook does, and they're building new ones. And they're putting in 40 or 50 Caterpillar generator sets that are about 3.5 megawatts each at each data center. So, I mean, data centers are exploding. The world we live in demands energy. And so finding the cleanest source of it is what people want to do. And at the end of the day, the cleanest source is nuclear energy. I mean, the U.S. Navy has never had an accident, never had a failure, never put anything back into the environment. And, that's someday it's going to come back full circle, because there's no way that we can get the energy that we need for an economy off of wind, solar, and, you and I've both spent a lot of time in developing nations. And as the old moniker said from the administration of 45, is all jobs matter, and they do. And I mean, if you want countries to grow, you want people to, to improve their lives, improve their education, you got to have energy in those countries, and they have to have jobs, meaningful jobs.
Well, exactly. So let's talk about, speaking of that, well, there's two things I want to ask you about. One is, when I was in Ukraine and I was, advising the government there, and there was a lot of talk about, rebuilding the power grid. This is before the war, and they always talked about green energy, trying to make green energy, creating green energy, and then the government was offering tax credits, and then they weren't paying people. And there was a whole host of issues with a country like Ukraine, as you know. But in the rebuilding post-war, because there will be a post-war, what do you think is going to happen in Ukraine? Are they going to go more green? Are they going to, I mean, what is your professional opinion about the future of energy in Ukraine?
Well, Dane, it's an interesting question, because, as I said, there cannot be any meaningful rebuilding of the grid until there's a cessation of hostility. And because a lot of the assets that's going to be required are machines coming in that weigh 150 tons. And you've got to have roads, you've got to have cranes, you've got to have infrastructure to bring those assets in. I think for the short term, you take a disaster recovery model, which we're very familiar with, bringing in distributed power generation. That means generator sets in containers and quickly dropping them on the ground, getting people's lives back to normal, and something like a Marshall Plan, if you will, to reconstruct Ukraine. And fortunately, I think the European Union and the United States and the developed world is willing to help them do that. And but they will start bringing in power generation. I think in the original, it'll be a lot of diesel fuel or natural gas generator sets. But do they want green? Sure, everybody wants green. But if you're talking about putting up wind turbines, it's expensive. It's the most expensive form of energy. Battery systems. What people don't understand about battery systems, they usually have an effective, output for about 20 minutes. and that's it. I mean, so they're a means of storing energy, but they're not a means of prolonged energy production. So you're going to have power generation, and I'm sure they're going to want to do that. When people start really examining green energy, look, I'm all for green energy, but you've got to match the solution to the demand. And for the immediate, time in Ukraine, when there is a cessation of hostilities, you've got to get people's lives back to normal. You've got to get people back to work, people back in the universities. And so that's going to take power. There's central heating in Ukraine. A lot of people in North America don't understand that they wouldn't accept, and you can appreciate this, that they don't have hot water for the month of July because your local boiler plant is getting rebuilt in the month of July. And there's no concept of that in North America. And if you've spent much time in Russia or CIS countries or Ukraine, you understand that when the summertime comes, you might not have hot water for a month. And so I think a lot of things will change. I think they will want to have green solutions, but the first solutions they're going to need are going to have to be less expensive, more capability, more production of energy. And, that's going to be distributed power generation until permanent power generation can be installed and brought online.
Well, the reality is anything that they're going to do requires funding, right? You have to have money. You can't, and even though there's been a lot of money dedicated supposedly for the rebuilding of Ukraine, so the question also, as you know, from Ukrainians don't have a lot of money. I mean, the average Ukrainian can't, it's not like you can increase your power bill by, 100% or 200% or 300% to pay for something new. So money is going to be an issue.
Most people don't realize that a surgeon in Ukraine makes $1,000 a month.
I know. I mean, it's shocking. I mean, it really is shocking.
It's totally.
So on the power, I'm going to show my stupidity here. Once again, I am an Alabama boy, so bear with me.
Oh, come on.
So let's talk about electric cars, because the owner of Silverbird, or the founder of Silverbird, Ben Murray Bruce, who I think is watching, loves alternative energies, and he loves these Teslas and cars like that. But for there to be a battery in a Tesla, at some point in time, that battery has to be charged first, correct? I mean, a battery has to be charged before it can actually be used, and it requires power to charge that battery in order to put it in a car or to do something with it. So that's why I guess we have an increase in power stations. Is that as the growing of green energies, even electric cars, means that more power is having to be produced in order to create these new technologies. Correct?
Correct. Thus the fallacy of taking away natural gas stoves and saying put an electric stove. I mean, we don't have enough energy as it is. So, but you have to. So that battery has to be charged.
Yeah. So, like in a place like Nigeria, you're right. I mean, power is, it's an oil-rich country. I would say that probably not all the oil gets to where it needs to be in that country. But a country like Nigeria, do you see, like in your business, do you see opportunities for you? I mean, to rebuild power grids in that country?
Sure. We actually sold a lot of equipment to Chevron in the past that went out in the Niger Gulf region for production, and but in a lot of these places like Nigeria, there's no real centralized grid. And I mean, if you've been to Nigeria, which I'm sure you have, you hear a lot of generator sets running. I mean, it becomes in certain places not so much, but other places. But the country, it's an oil-rich country, and there needs to be a centralized view as to power production, because they have the means to do it. And if you want economy to flourish, if you want people, I listen to a lot of your broadcasts and talking about immigration, and I think if people had meaningful work and they had power and they had energy and they had thriving economies at home, they would stay. They would stay home. I mean, I think people love their homes, but they don't. They don't like the fact that that I don't have the opportunities here. But it takes energy to grow an economy in a country, and I think that's a central theme for me, is that seeing these underdeveloped nations be able to become energy independent in some sort of way, and start building their economies through getting people to work and getting them into meaningful manufacturing and into meaningful jobs. Engineering, water, you name it.
Well, I think you hit on a point there. I mean, it's like in Nigeria, and I've spent a lot of time there, and just like you, I've been in a lot of less developed countries, that have a lot of opportunity but need a lot of work. But listen, I do a lot of political work, as you know, and you have people running for office says, well, we'll better the education system, or we will build new roads, or we'll do this. But you know what? Without power, you can't do anything. Without power, you can't have a school. Without power, you can't educate kids. I mean, I know a lot of kids in certain parts of the world, they rely on sunlight, to go to school. But the reality is, for any country to grow, you have to have a dependable power grid. That was one of the problems in Guyana when I was down there, is that, the diesel generator plant, the one that they had, I don't know, I'm not going to say this right, but the power oscillated. Maybe it would destroy like my computer, it would destroy your computer because it wasn't a constant stream of energy. And so it destroys things, let alone help things. And, so as much as they wanted to build new schools and have greater education and try to invite manufacturers to come, you can't have manufacturers move to a country if there's not a dependable power grid.
Ever tried to read a book by candlelight? It might be fun and romantic for the moment, but if you're trying to educate your child, I mean, after it goes, when sun goes down, I mean, it's the basic rudimentary things you and I take for granted are not there.
Well, I agree. And I was just recently in Vietnam and Cambodia and that whole part of the world, and and people talk about Vietnam and opportunities in Vietnam. I mean, it definitely is growing, but once again, I think a country like Vietnam can grow even more. In Cambodia, I think there's a lot of potential in Cambodia, but without power, you can't do it. So let me ask a base question. So I know, let's say tomorrow, in a part of somewhere in the world has said, we want to have power. We want to have immediate power. I've seen pictures of you bringing these giant tractor trailers. Tell me about that. Is that just like a giant power generator, or how does that work?
Well, there's technology of diesel. Both Cummins, Caterpillar, MTU, the major manufacturers, all build portable power modules and 40-foot sea containers, both natural gas and diesel. And that's distributed energy. That's where you bring it in, and you can quickly mobilize it, quickly set it up, and it's scalable, so you can put it in massive blocks. It's kind of shocking sometimes. I've seen as much as 200 of these on a site, generating 300 to 400 megawatts of power, or it can be down to one container with 1,000 kW, or you could have a gas turbine generator set, like GE General Electric builds as a TM2500 is kind of the both them and Pratt & Whitney build a mobile pack, Pratt & Whitney's mobile pack, around 30 megawatts of power. But those machines are portable. They're rapidly deployable, but you've got to have somewhere roads that will handle 300 tons going down the road, and you've got to have the capability of supplying the fuel to those machines. A lot of these places like Nigeria just they don't have the capability of supplying natural gas at 31 bar, 450 psi, or burning somewhere around 2,000 gallons an hour, 7,600 liters. So those things demand a lot of support. But once they're in, they're a high density power. They make a lot of energy, but there's got to be a structured approach to this. Every country, if people would look at it and say, okay, what's the structured approach here? And when Rita and Katrina came through, Haley Barbour was the governor of Mississippi, and at that time we had a lot of gas turbine generator sets that we had bought from Williams Distributed Energy, and they were all located in our facility in Olive Branch, Mississippi, and they wanted to come up and get them, and he was, I want to come up, we're going to get these, but where they had grid to connect to, they didn't have gas or gas pressure. where they had gas pressure, they didn't have grid to connect to. So you've got to match the solution to the situation. Nigeria is a 50 hertz country. We're a 60 hertz country. So you got to have equipment that is dual frequency or built to the specific need. But there's a structured approach, and there has to be a plan, and there has to be money to fund that. But, if you want to solve immigration, solve the energy problem in these countries, and give people meaningful, lives that they can live and jobs that they can go to.
No, listen, I agree 100% with that. I mean, you're right. In many of my shows, we talk about immigration. Here in the UK, where I am currently, it was a big issue, for the prime ministership here, it was a big issue in the United States. It's a big issue in Germany. Immigration is a huge issue. People don't want immigrants coming in, and right, wrong, or different. Even though I'm a product of immigration, it's just the reality is controlled immigration, legal immigration. There's a big difference. Once again, I don't want to get down to the weeds, but there's a big difference between a discussion in legal immigration and illegal immigration. And one thing that I should be very clear is that poor countries, there's a lot of illegal immigration because of the issues that you talk about. And I do a lot of work in Libya, and what we see is that there are a lot of people coming from Nigeria into Libya to go across the Mediterranean into Europe. And that's because, why are they leaving Nigeria? Because they don't have opportunities. Listen, you're right. I'm an Alabama boy.
Corruption. If you can solve corruption and have the money go where it's supposed to go for the use it is, I mean, there's so much talent in these countries. I mean, you know what? I've worked with fantastic engineers from Nigeria. I worked from India. I mean, you name it. I mean, there's brilliance in these countries, and the brain drain is terrible. These people, if they were provided opportunity and they had that opportunity, that's where the industrial world's got to do a better job.
Well, yeah, and that's, maybe this show should be more, instead about power in war zones, power just for economic growth and stability, because honestly, you're right. I mean, like in Lebanon, I mean, they had a huge brain drain in Lebanon because talk about generators. Every single home in the country had a generator. Because there's no centralized power grid that actually worked or that was dependable. And so you have to address the power needs of a country in order to address the quality of life. And you have a great quality of life. Listen, if I had a great quality of life in Alabama, I don't think I ever would have left. Well, maybe I would have. Who knows? Or they would have kicked me out of the state. But the reality is, quality of life is the most basic thing in order to, you can't have a middle class without a quality of life, okay? You either have very rich people or very poor people, no middle class, and a country's economic stability and livelihood is based upon a middle class. That's just the reality of it.
They're the consumers.
Though they are. They're the consumers, they're the workers, they're everything, and
Yep.
So we have to build middle classes, and that's one thing, like in Nigeria, they need to work more on the middle class because they just don't have a very strong middle class there.
Every power plant we've ever built in the third world, we go and we hire local people. And, I feel rewarded in the fact that many times I'll get a message on WhatsApp or something from a guy that just walked up off the street, in Honduras and never worked a job, never had the opportunity to learn anything, and, be there working in the power plant and learn a skill, learn how to weld, learn how to, deal with logistics, learn how to read an Excel spreadsheet, learn how to read. And so it's rewarding in the fact of taking local people and training them. And then when we leave, most of the time they're hired by the power plant that we built. And that's rewarding. I mean, they need the opportunity. And by the fact that we were there building a power plant, I embrace that. That's you got to give something back. And, you want people locally to embrace what you're doing there. And so, but more of that needs to go on. I'm not just educating people and giving them opportunities is what I'm talking about.
Well, exactly. And I think in Nigeria, for example, and in a lot of developing worlds, is that, I think that, well, I know in Nigeria specifically, there's so many, as you said, so many brilliant people, so many people who don't want to leave the country, who want to invest in the country, but they have to have the quality of life. And to go back to Ukraine real quick, I mean, one of the issues that, I'm still actively involved there. One of the issues that, people talk a lot about is about the returning of all the Ukrainians around the world, who have left, primarily women and children. But for them to come back, you have to have a quality of life. And you can't have that good quality of life without power. So, you're right. Once a cessation of violence happens, or which I think will probably happen in the next 6 to 9 months, then you have to build the power. And only then can you actually rebuild rebuild Ukraine the way it needs to be rebuilt. Because once again, you can rebuild the infrastructure, but if the people don't come back, it's not going to be the same quality of life. So listen, we have 1 minute left or 30 seconds left. So give us your wrap up here. What if you want to leave us with any words of wisdom? What words of wisdom would those be, Keith?
Oh, Dane, you and I grew up in the South. The Civil War in the United States, brother against brother. And this thing with Ukraine and Russia breaks my heart because I have friends in both places in Moscow. We've worked there a lot, and we've worked in Ukraine a lot. And we were participating in the oil and gas show in Kyiv for 5 years. So developed a lot of relationships there. And I just wanted to stop. I have friends there who have relatives that live in St. Petersburg, and they don't talk anymore. And that's just, to me, it's heartbreaking. And I just, these things have just got to stop, and people have got to. Hopefully, time will heal those relationships and hearts. And I look for better days, and I wish the people of Ukraine the very best. And every time I'm there, we're doing the best that we can do. In my collective group, there's a lot of care about what we're doing, and we are making the best effort to both hire people locally, give them jobs, but also bring back energy to Ukraine.
Well, listen, I applaud everything you're doing. It's amazing work that you're doing. Is we will see you next Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you.